Everyone, so we are at J&L Game. Today we are having an interview with one of the workers here. His name is Johnny. Pleasure. Thank you for having us. And I want to ask a couple of questions based off of the store, how it operates. So first question is, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Me, I'm just your average Joe, basically. I found J&L hiring through the newspaper. I said, I need a job. Give them a call, and now here I am. I've been playing video games for a long, long time. I started with a Super Nintendo when I was a kid, and then I slowly moved up to, all the way to the PS5 now, but I still have a lot of my old collection back then because thankfully for my family, we never really moved anywhere. So nothing got lost, nothing got given away. I still have all my collection ready to, ready to play.
And how long have you been working for J&L?
Let me see. I think I started 2017, so a bit later in to J&L's life cycle, but for the most part now I kind of handle about 90% of the day-to-day.
Right. And guys, the owner is not present with us today. He allowed us to interview Johnny, so appreciate his time and also get the best of his knowledge for the business itself. So Johnny, were you at the location at Chinatown before you guys moved to 34th Street?
So funnily enough, I was there technically because I was also a customer of J&L back then. Okay. And back then it was just convenient for me and my family just to walk down to J&L instead of taking the train to go to Toys R Us or go to Funko Land all the way out there. Because in Chinatown was very close to us, so we just had to walk down. We just were customers for a long time.
Do you happen to know why from Chinatown you guys transferred stores?
Main thing is space, 100% the spacing. Because as more games come out, as more systems come out, we needed more space. You can probably see we're having issues right now showing off all our PS5 and Switch games because there's so many of them that you can't even see the colors and you can just barely see the spines of them. So it's definitely, space was one thing. Another thing was just foot traffic, right? Chinatown back then over the years was just slowly kind of dying down really in terms of tourism and foot traffic.
Right.
Versus here, Midtown New York City, there's always a hustle and bustle, tourists coming in or people working their hours, clocking in, clocking out. And people always just, it's just a nice place to kind of be, literally in the heart of the city almost.
Right, yeah, Times Square is right up the block.
Yeah.
So as a store, would you guys happen to say that you were drawing in more so tourists or people that actually live in the city?
So now I would say it's definitely tourists, because this is New York City after all. A lot of people fly here on vacations or what have you. So definitely a lot more tourists that are coming in and looking for things that they probably can't find in their home city or even home country. But we do get a lot of regulars still picking up, the latest releases.
Right. And you guys, the inventory is incredible here. You guys have sealed stuff from all the way back from the 90s, Super Nintendo. I see a GameCube transfer wire for the Game Boy, sealed. You have 4 of them. PlayStation 2 memory cards, OEM, sealed. I see 10 of them on the rack. Would you define the store as a modern store or more so a retro game store?
For the most part, mainly is a retro game store. We carry the latest titles also just because it's just, things that still will eventually fall into retro at some point. You know what I mean? Back then PS2 was in, and now PS2 is retro. Someday PS5 would be retro.
Yeah.
So technically it doesn't really harm us to stock the new titles, but for the most part we've kind of always been this retro game store. Originally we started with Super Nintendo, but back then that was the latest thing, that was modern. But now it's retro. And a lot of stuff you mentioned, our GameCube wires or our sealed games, those are just stock that is just never sold. It's been sitting here for years, honestly.
Which is crazy, and you don't realize how fast time flies.
Mm-hmm.
We're 24 years old, me and Anthony behind the camera, and yeah, GameCube is considered retro.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy. Soon, actually, in 2 years, the Wii is gonna be considered retro.
Yep.
Mind blowing. It's crazy. So to operate a store like this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys do advertising, promotions to get customers to walk by, or do you guys only rely on foot traffic in general?
For the most part, we haven't really used any kind of like real advertising. Like, we don't use Google to basically put us out on like search engine stuff or whatnot. For foot traffic, when it's usually warmer out, we have our big Pikachu out front, so that usually attracts a lot of people. But other than that, yeah, we so far we don't really advertise, but people just know us from just being regulars and then just word of mouth essentially.
Do you happen to know when J&L first opened, like what year?
I want to say it was probably close to like 93, 94, back when it's like when Super Nintendo was out, and also Neo Geo was another big system that was out at the time.
And I see that you guys have a lot of Neo Geo stuff. For a store to have Neo Geo products, that's very uncommon, and Neo Geo is super expensive to find. It's so rare. The cartridges are like this big. It's crazy. And you guys even have Neo Geo systems. I see that you guys are having a sale for $6.99 for the whole console. That's pretty dope. So most of your inventory, right? How often do you guys get trade-ins? Because it's, to me personally, since you're in the city, you would think like more neighborhood, like people who live here, more so in a neighborhood, would do trade-ins. So I just want to know, like, since it's just like a very businessy area, touristy area, like how often do trade-ins come in?
I would say it's probably at least one every day minimum, right? So the most part is we're kind of like in a local area, so it's the train ride away for most people. So people getting out their basement, attic, garage, or just sweeping things up, they just find the things that they don't play anymore. Sometimes they just bring them here to us.
How do you guys, with being in such an expensive area, I'm sure the overhead is insane here compared to back in Chinatown, because this is very mainstream like business. To keep up with everything, do you guys sell games above price? Like, do you guys like inflate the prices just a little bit to keep up? Do you guys sell online? Like, how do you guys go about that?
Yeah, a little bit of all that. So we do have our website, we do sell online. We actually just like did a new version of our website that hopefully is better for a lot of people, but we manually take pictures of our games, new and used, front, back, opened up if they're used.
Wow. Just
so people know, what they're getting instead of just seeing like a stock picture, But for the most part, yeah, overhead is very up there. Like the heart of Midtown is not generous, to say the least.
No, not at all. Yeah. It's brutal. And
so for the most part, a lot of our stock, a lot of our retro games especially, yes, will be higher 100% than prices you're going to find Facebook Marketplace, eBay, Craigslist, what have you. But that's the kind of trade-off, is that it's more expensive, but it's here, you can see it. If you want us to test it in the back, we can set it up in the back and make sure that it's working. And you know that for the most part, it's probably as clean as it's probably ever going to get.
Right. And what services do you guys provide besides just selling video games?
Oh, mainly repair services as well. A lot of people also have their systems that they dug up. Mainly, a lot of the time, it's just their old like Game Boy Advance, or PSP that, of course, over the years, they just stopped working, right? A lot of this technology was not meant to last forever. So for the most part, some of us relive their childhood. They don't want to get another, Game Boy, another PSP, because this was their Game Boy, this was their PSP. So they bring it here and they get it fixed, and then it's like they're a kid again.
And I heard that you guys do pre-orders for games, imports especially. Would you say that people come here more so for the modern games and the newest releases, or more retro? Like, would you guys say like you sell more 64 games than a PS4 game, PS5 game?
Oh, it's a strange call. I mean, like, of course, anytime there's a new Pokemon game coming out, that will like immediately be like the best seller. But a lot of the time, for the most part, people do pick up a lot of retro titles, because a lot of them is that you can get modern titles now. Like, it doesn't have to be from us. It can be from Amazon. You can get digitally, and you have it be installed by the time you get home. But for old games, you're gonna need, the actual disc or the actual cartridge to get it. And where else are you gonna get it?
Based off of I have a cousin that shops here all the time. You guys do like special orders, like if he wants a specific game, you guys order it for customers, correct? Or am I mistaken?
It's a thing we used to do. We haven't done so much because a lot of times special orders are imports.
Okay.
And over the course of the the COVID pandemic and whatnot, shipping costs like for international shipping has gone way up. So for the most part, while we can do it, financially speaking, it's just better off that you or like you as the customer order on your own just to save on that kind of like money.
Right, there's no middleman.
Right.
And you brought something up that I wanted to speak about. COVID, the lockdown, the city completely shut down. How was that experience? Like, how did you guys even manage to stay afloat with that?
I mean, for me, it was great. You know, I got to kick back and relax for a couple of months. You know, but for the store, thankfully, for the most part, our landlords were a bit compromising on that because you can't really charge full like rent and utilities if everything is just shut down. So thankfully, we had a small break on that, which just gave us that little bit of time to, when we open back up, to start business again slowly, and then just have enough to stay afloat until now we're a few years past it.
And it's great to know that you guys stood in business after the pandemic. A lot of businesses closed down, unfortunately, but it's good to see that a retro game store out of anything can survive during hard times like that. Do you mind if we can go towards more so the import games?
Yeah, sure.
Over here? So these are the imports that you have, more like GameCube, PlayStation 4 specifically. I see Game Boy games, a couple 64 games over here across. Do you guys, this is the most imported like selection I've seen in any other store. Do you happen to know why imports than just US made games?
I mean, so a good portion of our customer base does look for imports, right? Sometimes like import copies of games, they have, a lot of them also, we're gonna have like Chinese subtitling. Back when we were in Chinatown, so a lot of our customer base were Chinese customers that, can't really read English, can't really read Japanese, but they can obviously understand Chinese. So a lot of the imports back then were also kind of tailored to Chinese customers. Now, for the most part, we get them in is because that some games, they just don't, show up here in America. Like a lot of the games that you might see down there, like Battle Stadium, DON, Dragon Ball One Piece Naruto, like kind of like the first kind of Jump Force or Shonen Jump fighting game. It was ever brought over here.
Right.
So it was just kind of like, mainly it's like almost like a collection basically. It was things that never released over here.
So now it's just like more so collecting for exclusive games, not that aren't made in the US at all.
Right.
And what I notice when I'm looking around, like even online, for example, why are imported games, especially for GameCube, for example, cheaper than US made games?
So back then it was mainly because of region locking. Right, back then they were either like physical or just kind of built-in lockouts for game consoles to not read other region games. Right, so for the GameCube in particular, you would need a modified or a Japanese GameCube in order to even like play in the first place.
I know it's easy for your mind to wander. I want you to really concentrate on me.
With having imports being costly for shipping, would you say it's worth even bringing them to the store, since there's a very specific market for those imports?
Nowadays, not so much. Back then, we did have people genuinely looking for a lot of these like Japan exclusive titles. Like also now, a lot of the Japan titles or like imported titles, they also feature English subtitling or English like text.
Yeah.
So not only is it not available in the States, but you can get it imported, have a hard copy of it, and also be in English, which is like another big draw to it. But these past few years have been not so good for us getting imports.
And would you say eventually, as the market is adapting to those specific settings for the modern games, having multiple languages and settings, would you guys, besides having exclusives, of course, because exclusives are only sold in in Japan and things like that. Would you guys even think about not selling imports at all?
It's hard to say because there'll always be like titles that will only release exclusively like in Japan, in Japanese, and like they won't see translations for probably years on end. So we'll still probably look for those, just because it might take years for a translation to even come through, if at all.
Out of all the items that you have in your store, do you happen to know what's the most expensive one that you have or the rarest one that you have?
Most expensive, technically, we don't have it anymore, but we sold a copy of Panzer Dragoon Saga for the Sega Saturn, a North American copy. It's a 4-disc Saturn game that is probably like one of the rarest like kind of titles out there. I think honestly we last sold it at about like 3,000.
Wow, that's a crazy number. And that came in through trade?
I don't quite remember how it got to us. What I do remember is the customer who bought it literally walked up, browsed our Saturn selection, saw it on the wall and said, "I'll take it."
You got fucking money. He got money. Get it all for him.
And then that was it.
That's crazy. Since your market is also directed towards tourists, how can you give them an experience, even if they're not from here, for you guys like to give them a fond memory of? Like, you know, usually when you're selling to locals, you want them to come back, but like in a tourist perspective, how would you give them like the best experience possible so they can talk about you guys when they go back to wherever they're from?
So for the most part, it's kind of tough, right? Since tourists, we don't know if they're gonna come back. We don't know if another COVID is gonna happen. So for the most part, I mean, now we have the technology like Google Translate helps us a lot when we're dealing with customers who don't speak English very well or at all. Right, so that helps us kind of explain things to customers that originally we could never do because we only speak generally English. Another thing that probably keeps like a tourist memory in mind is you can probably see all of our showcases, these dollar bills or currencies from other countries. These are people, you know, writing like a "thank you for being here" or "thanks for help me relive my childhood," stuff like that. Or even just like a, you know, like "I was here in New York City" kind of message, and they just, you know, leave it here with us and we just tape it up here, and over the years it just goes all the way around the store.
That's pretty cool. You know what? I was looking at this, but like I didn't think about it like that in that perspective. That's actually really cool. I'm sure you guys got almost every currency in the globe, to be honest with you.
Almost, I think.
That's kind of crazy. I noticed while game hunting, sourcing from, because I own my own online business, so I try to meet different businesses and try to build relationships and network with others. But what I realized is that there's not a lot of game stores in New York, and you're one of the only few in Manhattan. Why is that?
I think for the most part, it's a tough business to stay afloat in. For the most part, even GameStop, their margin for profit is mainly through their used games. The same thing for us as well. GameStop even branched out to, you know, selling like merch, right? T-shirts, mugs, and all that. And the one on 33rd, I think it was one of their flagships, like a two-level store. They closed down. You know, so for the most part, honestly, we're hanging in there too. We're doing okay still, so don't need to really like worry about us yet. But it's still tough.
And would you ever think that the store would relocate again due to such a high overhead in the city?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
That's the most, same thing again is this space, right? Like we're running out of space for showing a lot of our games. Like right now we don't even have any of our imports for PS1 or PS2 up anymore because our current collection of PS1 and PS2 takes up so much space. We can't just, show imports anymore. So those are all up on our website now, thankfully, to let customers kind of see them without seeing them essentially. You know what I mean?
Right. And is a business like this profitable per se?
If you want to get started in the business, it'd be very hard now because for the most part, you'd have to source suppliers for new games and also figure out a way to, if you can get your hands on just trade-ins. Because not everyone is going to want like an old copy of Madden or NBA, but that's what you're going to find people trading in 80% of the time.
That's funny because our last interview with our other business owner said the same exact thing. He was like, Maddens are the only things that are like coming in. It's harder to source. Everything's so scarce. Now it's a collector's market more than a gaming market because you can emulate. Out of all these genres, or out of all the different companies and consoles that you have, what's the least selling console in the store? Like what games?
I mean, realistically, the least selling is probably something like the Atari 2600 or the Sega Master System, right? Games, system that utilize coax essentially, because coax is so prone to interference, especially now, and as well, like I don't think there's a good kind of coax to HDMI adapter.
Right.
Even then, Atari releases their their collections of like 100 Atari games on modern systems, so that's not really anything to worry about. The Master System, Sega games, Sega also does re-releases for their Sega games as well. So yeah, that kind of market is the smallest out of all we have.
Gotcha. And physical media is starting to disappear. There's discs, DVDs, all that stuff is starting to become a thing of the past. Is it a concern as a retro game store to know that eventually, who knows, from like the next 5 years, that everything's gonna be digital? Is it worrisome as a business?
It's not particularly worrisome at the moment. I mean, it's worrisome now because something like, like the Xbox Series X, a lot of the titles that we just don't get anymore because our suppliers don't get them anymore because everyone who owns like a modern Xbox is buying digital. Same thing with PS4, is that, less people are picking up PS4 titles. Wasn't picking up for PS5 or getting them digitally. But for the most part, we're not so worried because people will always kind of want a hard copy. I'm sure you saw the news of I think it was like Ubisoft president or head of something who said that, people should be ready to not own their games. And that's not something that should ever happen. And that's why the physical media is important to preserve. Same thing with like music and movies. People will always kind of look for the vinyl, not so much the CD or streaming it on like a hi-fi audio platform, but they want the physical vinyl. Or some people want genuinely like the old VHS for their favorite movie. There'll always be people hunting that down. So
Right.
I don't think we should be afraid for the moment.
And having a physical copy of anything has a value. You don't need the Wi-Fi. You don't need Wi-Fi to be able to use what you own if it's digital. That's a common problem. Imagine your Wi-Fi going out. That's it. What you bought, it doesn't matter. Having a hard copy, you can play it anytime you want. And you beat the game, you can sell it instead of having a digital. And would you say that like PlayStation Plus and Game Pass are ruining the physical market?
I wouldn't say it's ruining. I would say for the most part, it's almost good that people are able to play, like titles available on Game Pass or PS Plus, just because it's tough now. When you spend $70 on a game, turns out you don't like it,
Right.
or even you spend like $10 or $15 on a small like indie game, and you don't like it. At least for Game Pass and PS Plus, is that you can try it out, and if you really do like it and want to support the company, support the devs, support us as a store, you can go buy the physical copy and just own it, because it might rotate out eventually too of the Game Pass or the PS Plus.
That is true. Those games don't stay on there forever. When I was looking around the store, you guys actually have a decent amount of custom consoles, right? When they come in, how do you even determine a price on that?
For the most part, it's genuinely about the same as like a regular console. And, like, as long as internally, like everything should be the same for the most part internally between like a custom console and a regular console.
Mm-hmm.
So for the most part, as long as like their shell or their cover they have on it is nice looking and passable, we kind of treat it similarly as a trader for the same system, like for the original system.
So Johnny, thank you for answering all my questions, brother. I
No
appreciate
problem.
you. For those who are watching the video, where can they find you?
You can find us on Instagram at jnlgame.nyc. That's Jerry Nancy Larry game.nyc. Also, just give us a quick Google, just J&L Game, New York City, and you'll probably find us.
In the heart of the city, guys. Amazing store, great answers. I learned a couple of things about the store and a couple of things about imports as well, because that's not my market. But guys, plug into nostalgia with Doshi. I'll catch you all later. Thanks for watching.